Join Dr. Crystal Eason every other Sunday at 7 p.m. for Finally I Choose Me, where your purpose and authenticity join together. We look forward to you participating in the discussion. We agree with God about who we say we are. Please join us. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to I Choose Me, where authenticity and purpose collides. We have a very important discussion this evening. We all have had a very rough week and probably months prior to. I want to introduce my guest that I'm very excited about. For one, I believe she is one of the most brilliant women that I've ever met. She was my boss when we worked for Vanguard Community Development Corporation. I want to introduce Donna Givens Davison tonight. She is just an amazing woman. I just have an informal introduction, and I'm just going to let her move forward with the formal introduction. But I've admired her for many, many years. I follow her. I am probably one of the behind the scenes cheerleaders, cheering her on in every endeavor. And so I'm just honest that I had a thought and text her and she said yes. It was no plan. It was no conversation. And so Donna, please, I'm excited to have you with Finally I Choose Me, where really we just agree with God about who we are as women. So welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I think I also need to give my shout out to Dr. Crystal Eason, who I worked with many years ago. I remember when we were working in the North End community and I was trying to bring about change, and you kept stopping at trauma and saying, we've got to deal with our trauma. A lot of these people are in trauma. And I'm like, oh, no, we just motivate them and stuff like that. And you always, grounded me in understanding that you cannot get away from your trauma. People have to heal. And so I want to thank you for the impact you've had on me professionally in helping me understand that you have to look beyond just the obvious and look inside at what people are dealing with. That we have a lot of brokenness in our community. And, since you kind of opened me up to that, I think I've been influenced by Dr. Joy DeGruy and her post-traumatic slavery syndrome concept and several other books that really talk about the impact of trauma on our bodies, on our minds, on our social interactions, on the way we perform in so many ways. And I would say that almost everybody I know this week who's close to me, because people who are close to me did not vote for Donald Trump, we're all traumatized. And trying to figure out how to deal with it and how to hold on to who we are as, women who are believers. Like, people are like, I hope all the bad things happen to you, Trump promises. I don't know if that's really a believer statement, but I am hoping for some bad shit, right? Excuse my language. But I'm hoping for some bad stuff, right? Because I'm hurt. And that's, that's what I'm coming at. But I really think that I'm happy to have this conversation with an expert on trauma and with somebody who has always really sort of held out the banner of let's look at how people are doing and not just what they're doing. So anyway, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I know I've tried to do some work with you, and then the pandemic hit. When it seemed like something always hit, and it would delay it. But I follow you. I follow all of your conversations about everything, but specifically the election process, having a Black woman run for president, the highest office in the country. But before we get into that, I want you to share with us what your role is, what you do in the community, share about your organization and what's coming up new.
All right. So I'm president and CEO of Eastside Community Network, which was actually founded as the Warren County Development Coalition in 1984. So we celebrated our 40th anniversary on November 1st. You were there.
Yes.
We do work in so many domains. It's really hard for me to describe what we do quickly, other than to say that what we're trying to do is we're trying to help build a community where people celebrate and share an inclusive social well-being. And so a few years ago, I was introduced to the concept of sustainability. And the idea of sustainability, a lot of times people think it's the environment. Or sometimes people think, well, sustainable funding, is this sustainable? Is this something that can keep going? But when you really look at what sustainability is, what you are looking at is the management of all of your resources, your social resources, your built resources, human resources, and natural resources for the inclusive social well-being of people in a community now and in future generations. And so, when we look at it, we have to say that me becoming rich and you being poor is not sustainable. Mm-hmm. Because somehow poverty is destabilizing, but so is hoarding of wealth. Mm-hmm. And so within our community, our focus is on building people holistically and equitably so that people can all enjoy the benefits of what we're doing. And that's significant because as you look at the city of Detroit right now, you see a rising downtown and neglected neighborhoods. And that's not sustainable. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, what happens is people leave the neighborhoods and that puts a drag on downtown. And only so many white people want to live in these one-bedroom apartments or studio apartments. And then you run out of tenants and you've overbuilt space. So, or, you've built all this new office space and you don't have businesses after the pandemic. People are working from home. Who's going to operate these businesses? It's not sustainable. Meanwhile, you have empty business strips all through our community, and it doesn't make sense. And we live in a city where 1 out of 3 properties has been taken from tax foreclosure since 2009. And yet every year we are granting billionaires tax abatements and saying, well, here's $50 million in tax abatements because you need this, billionaire, in order for us to invest here. This is what you need in order to make this project work. And it's so ridiculous to me that a billionaire needs $50 million because I'm trying to do the math and it doesn't make any sense to me. But right. But you're taking my house for $1,000 or for $500 or for $2,000. And that is such short-term thinking. So what our organization tries to do is try to deal with it on a neighborhood level, helping people really be strong at a neighborhood level by helping to address some of the things like helping people keep their homes. And if you have a home, helping your home be in good condition. And we want to make sure your water is on. And we want to make sure that while you're in this home, you have access to all of the resources that you need in order to live in a healthy manner. We want to make sure that, homes are gone. Right now you have a lot of vacant land. And we want to make sure that where people are living in vacant spaces, those lots don't look like blight. And so we help residents transform vacant lots and make them beautiful and make them functional, turn them into gardens, turn them into farms, turn them into parks that serve a larger community need. And then we also want to say, what do we do with all this vacant housing? Well, one of our newest projects is we're acquiring it and we're fixing it up. Now, we've only purchased 4 homes, but we pulled them out of the demolition pipeline in one neighborhood on one block in the Chandler Park neighborhood on the east side of Detroit. And
my neighborhood.
Okay, all right. Is that we're going to take these homes and we're going to reuse them because that's more sustainable than tearing down a home. And, whenever you demolish a home, all of these environmental toxins come out, all that stuff. But also all of the resources that went into building that home have been trashed as opposed to preserving it, So that's, some of our stuff. And then we are working on Mack Avenue to redevelop Mack Avenue from Connor to Moross. And that part of Mack bisects Grosse Pointe Park, Grosse Pointe, and Grosse Pointe Farms. So you have Detroit on one side and 3 Grosse Pointes on the other side. And we're trying to leverage all of the wealth and opportunity that you see in the Grosse Pointes to facilitate reinvestment on Mack Avenue. And we are partnering actually with the 3 cities of Grosse Pointes. We are partnering with the city of Detroit, and Wayne County is investing, as well as the state of Michigan, in a planning process to redo that. And the idea is we're going to revitalize our commercial strips as they are. During the pandemic, a lot of businesses closed, but because we've been working at this for about 7 years, we were able to maintain a lot of our businesses and actually open new businesses on Mack Avenue. And those businesses are close to where the people live. The cost is not that high. And so, once again, I'm going to keep on saying this, that is a sustainable way of rebuilding your economy, is helping build where people live. We are working with teenagers in our community, helping them to, be whole, helping them to be healthy. I used to be all about college and career success. Then I realized that a lot of our young people need a lot of healing also in order to be functional
Absolutely.
adults because they're dealing with all kinds of crap, right? And so we provide space. Well, the young people, when we first opened up our teen center, they call it chillable space. They can just come and hang out while also introducing them to leadership opportunities, doing summer employment, and just really creating space for them in our community to prosper as they go to college and beyond, or if they go straight into careers and beyond. The first person who ever walked to our doors, I'm so proud of this, as a program participant, went to Southeastern High School. He was not on track to graduate from high school. He was not involved in any community activities. Both of his parents were serving life sentences, and he was
Wow.
living couch surfing and living with a grandmother, but she didn't have room for him, so he just couch surfed with other relatives. And he just completed his master's degree.
Wow.
So I am super proud of that because it just shows that when you invest in young people, they can prosper and you can turn their lives around. So that's a piece of what we do. And then we do a lot of power building and neighborhood organizing, where we are working to educate people in our community about issues, especially things like environmental sustainability, the poisoning that's taking place through pollution and truck exhaust, trucks now running through our communities. We want to educate people on flooding and how to prevent flooding, and we're trying to pull together a plan to a watershed management plan for the Detroit River watershed. There's never been a management plan for it. And that means that you cannot attract federal or state resources to this area to reinvest in some of the spaces. But we're also, working to advocate to the city and to the Great Lake Water Authority on improvements that need to be made and sponsoring a number of projects. We have a fellowship program. We train people in sustainability leadership, and we also give project-based funding. We have a mini grant program for for nonprofits to create mobility projects, and we are working on a resilience hub network where we're working with about 13 organizations to create safe spaces in the community. And it's kind of cool because they're either City of Detroit organizations or large nonprofits, and then sometimes really small nonprofits like Tam Howard, one of our neighborhood partners, created a trailer and is using a trailer to provide shelter. So how do we help her? So that we can provide safe places in communities that, lack a lot of adequate resources. And then the centerpiece of our work this year, I think I've mentioned just about everything else, but the centerpiece of our work this year is the Stoudemire Wellness Hub. And that is our 17,000 square foot facility where we are enrolling people who live in our community as members. The cost of joining is between $0 and $20 a year, your choice. And we have about 30 to 35 classes every week. We've got clubs, we have activities, we have partnerships with a lot of organizations and healthcare providers. But the real most important thing that we're doing is we're building community inside of that space. So it is, this is probably going to be my last job before I retire.
Yeah.
And it's a culmination of everything I've tried to do over the past 30 plus years of working inside the community. How do we take this space and turn it into a model for how you can really build communities from the inside out, build power, but also take care of the needs of people where you live. So that's it. I'm also a podcaster, so I have my own podcast.
Yes, you do.
And I also teach at Columbia University about urban sustainability, graduate students in the sustainability management program.
Amazing. For our listeners, did you hear all of that? I mean, just listening to that and me knowing that you've always been very passionate and committed to the community from the inside out. And that's the difference. And that's real ministry. Ministry is meeting the needs of people. And the more that we do that, the better off our communities and families will be. So I thank you for all of the work. And just when I walked in, I'm like, wait a minute, I grew up over here. It's something I need to do. And we're going to figure that out. So thank you for your commitment, your hard work over the years. And we have examples of the young people, even from the North End, who have made a great impact in their life. And that's what we should all be doing at this point.
I'm going to say one last thing before I'm done. All of this, we can talk about what all of it is. You talk about God and everything, but God to me is love.
Absolutely.
My faith is love. And I believe when you love on people, love is healing in and of itself. And we have to create mechanisms to give more love to people who are not loved in our world. And, so much of what I do is centered around wanting more people to feel loved in so many ways. When I took over the organization in 2016, we did a survey in the community. And people said, well, this is great. You're doing a lot of power building, but where you're not helping people with their basic needs. And that was, okay, how do we meet people's needs? And if we want people to do what we want them to do, then we have to figure out how to give people what they need. And a lot of that's going to show up in this election, where we are chastising poor Black people for not voting often enough. And we're chastising other groups of people for not voting correctly as we see it. But we're not giving a lot of these same people the kind of love where they feel connected to us.
Absolutely.
And connected to whatever the ideals we have, our journeys. And so I get excited about the opportunities to really, because I think that's what God does, is God gives you the ability to give love, right? And
He
so that's what
does.
I try to do. And so I thank you. I appreciate having known you. And I mean, Vanguard was such an amazing experience, but
Definitely.
people that I met there, to still have people actually still acting in love, is a beautiful thing.
It is. Well, God is love. And if we don't love each other, then we cannot say we love God.
Exactly.
And so I don't think we talk enough about that. But truly, God is love. And so I think with everything that's happening and going on, love is the antidote for it all.
Yeah.
But also, we got to love ourselves so that we can love. And that's another discussion, because you can't give what you don't have. And oftentimes it manifests in a lot of material things, and that's just not love. And so I was, after the election, and never in my life have I've always paid attention, or I've always kind of followed who was running for office, but I had so much anticipation, so much excitement, so much hope, that for the first time in my lifetime, okay, yes, Obama, of course, I was excited about him, but it's something about a woman that I know that changes the atmosphere of things. And so I was following, I was excited, and all of the discussions. And so what are your thoughts in the first place, just about, I mean, she in 3 months raised money and made the ballot. I mean, that just showed me that anything can happen when we do come together. But what are your just your basic thoughts about her and her ability to make it to the ballot?
Well, let me say this. When she was running for president, and I'm a political junkie, and so I watched the presidential debate, one of the first presidential debates, and she took Joe Biden to task for his stance on busing. I don't know if you remember that. And she said, you did something, and there was a little girl and who would not be where she is if we didn't have busing where I lived. And then she said, I was that little girl. And you could see he was almost speechless. And so I was like cheering. I was like, that's my girl. Get him, get him, get him, get him, get him. And then like 2 hours later, after the debates, she's selling T-shirts. I was the little girl, and it's got her picture of her as a little girl. And I was like, huh? What? It felt like you commercialized my pain. And so, and then 2 weeks later, she's backing down from that. And so I felt betrayed by her in the original election. She came to the Detroit for the NAACP. I'm just being real right now.
That's what we want.
Because I know I'm not saying things that are politically correct, but you know me well enough to know I don't do that very well anyway. But she came to Detroit, and she spoke at the NAACP dinner, and she talked about herself for about 40 minutes, her family and background and everything. I'm like, are you running for president to talk about yourself? Why aren't you talking about the people? Why aren't you talking about the needs? And I was kind of turned off by that. A lot of people were, to be honest with you. Then Biden made her his vice president. And I thought, well, she's a safe choice, and, I'm not Greek or anything. But even if I was, I respect her.
Right.
as a leader. I respect her accomplishments, but I didn't have that sister girl bonding moment with her that a lot of people did. And when Biden immediately stepped down, initially I thought it's not going to be her. There's no way it's going to be her. And then it was. What shocked me was how excited that made me. What
Right.
shocked me is I'm not even your fan and I'm excited, right? She's 1 year younger than me. She went to Howard. I was going to go to Howard until the very last minute. Would have been her classmate. I probably wouldn't have been Greek, but I would have been on the same campus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just thinking about that, it felt so personal. I felt connected to this, like, wow, somebody who has traveled a similar path, a similar age, can be there. What I saw was some initial really strong promise in her campaign. I was at, Romulus. I was there wearing my, my, what is it, the Converse, like, the gym shoes,
Yeah.
and pearls. When I was
The
walking, I was
pearls and the
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, Chucks and pearls. I was
chucks
there,
and
right?
pearls.
And, you know, and it was good, but I think, again, she almost peaked. And sometimes you want a candidate to go further in.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden she's touring with Liz Cheney. And I'm like, what the hell? Okay, Republicans, you can join me. You don't have to. And it became somebody somehow convinced her that rather than leaning into her connection to people who live in cities, who are Black and other people of color, she decided that she was going to try to steal Donald Trump's thunder.
Mm.
And it failed.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing about, Republicans, I've said this for years, is Republicans are always going to be better at being Republicans than Democrats.
Yeah, of course.
So we should concede Republican thinking to them and be Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one area where I felt like there was just an inattentiveness. Talk to people. If people say they aren't hearing to you, talk to them. And then you had this rising up of Black men saying, we feel invisible here. And I'm irritated by it, but I looked at it and I said, does she have any Black men around her? Just show up with one. I mean, stand up with one, whatever. You can't. So you flip it. Part of the reason we trusted Obama was Michelle. Okay. Michelle let us know he saw
She was
us.
a
Okay.
sister, right?
He may not have grown up with us, but he married Michelle. And I'm not saying she should not have married Doug, but I
Right.
think she did not necessarily think of the optics of what it means. And I saw somebody post that on Facebook. They said, I'm not mad. She doesn't have a relationship with her father. There's no Black man in her life. And that's cool. But where are the other guys? And so that's one thing. And then the other thing I feel is though that would be a perfect time for her to pivot and say, I'm talking about the Black family. I'm holding families together. I want to help families as opposed to saying, here's my agenda for Black men, which they felt was insincere. And it just felt like, Black men did vote for her. I'm going to give Black men credit because most of them did vote for her. But I felt like, and I think we need leaders who are willing to acknowledge the fact that our families need to be whole. Our families need to be stronger. Our neighbors need to be stronger. Our communities need to be stronger. Black men and women cannot thrive outside of Black community. Now, individuals can, but as a community, we cannot thrive unless our community is stronger. And our community is what's being threatened. And, you can talk about families, not just Black families, other families. I just didn't hear that narrative. I didn't hear her talk about poverty. And poverty is real. And it's been real. Homelessness is real. It's been real. Mass incarceration is real. And people feeling like they've been thrown away society is real. So those are some areas where I thought there was lost opportunity. And then finally, there are two areas where I thought, I'm not sure this is the right approach. I have been opposed since the start, the U.S. supporting Israel in its, bombing of Gaza, killing of innocent people. And, every time she was asked about it, she always started, look, on October 7th, this happened. Girl, we know that happened, okay? Now 40,000 people are dead. When is enough enough? Well, we're never going to swear. It's like, that's tone deaf because a lot of younger voters are horrified by the war.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are horrified by the war. And so I think she wanted to convince voters that she would be a strong commander in chief. So she started sounding like a hawk. And now she's surrounded by Cheney's and Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney's giving her endorsement and all these generals. And it's like, what? You look like a hawk. And that's not a traditional Democratic place to at least surround yourself with all of these folks. And then I feel like the border crisis, there was so much of a lost opportunity there, because I think that the Trump administration and Republicans and our, larger society has really demonized immigrants who are brown. And the reason that they don't want them here is not because they are stealing jobs from Black people, and not because they're committing crimes all over the place, but because if we keep up with these current immigration patterns, the United States will no longer be a predominantly white nation. They threaten the dominance of whiteness, if we're being real. And so you have these stories. I was listening to this podcast. I don't want to go too far afield, but it takes place in Ohio, where this family of these 8 people were executed in this small town in Appalachia in Ohio. And they found that 3 of these households where they were killed had marijuana grow operations. And so they're talking about it, and they say, well, it could be the Sinaloa cartel that came in and did that. As if the only people who kill people and execute people for drug money are Mexicans. And it reinforces those narratives. And I think it's important that we break those stereotypes and we don't lean into them. So instead of her at any time acknowledging that the people who come in here are human and desperate, she says, well, you know what? I had the strongest border bill, and I'm going to get, and it's like, okay, that's great. That's what Trump's going to do. If you want us to believe you're going to be different than mass deportation, explain and make people feel as though you see them and you care about them and you're going to try to take care of them. And I just felt like these humanizing moments where, as Black women, that's what we do. We care for people.
We care for people.
Give that love. We are nurturers. And don't be a hawk, be a nurturer, girl. That's our strength. If you believe you're going to all of these churches and God is in you, where's the love for Palestinian people? Because Jesus didn't just love, well, Jesus didn't love Christians because there weren't Christians during Jesus' time. But Jesus
right.
He didn't just love his own people. He loved other people. He loved people because those are all God's children. Show it. And so I think this is not just a referendum on Black women, although that's how a lot of us are taking it, or even on women's leadership. And that last thing I'm going to say, and this is going to sound really petty, but, every time I looked up, she's wearing these boxy pantsuits. It's like,
I know. I said that.
God, can you put on a dress? You are a woman. Play it up, okay? You are a beautiful woman. I need to see you looking gorgeous sometimes, okay? It's okay. You don't have to be a man in order to lead. If you're leading as a woman, let me see that. And so all of those things, I think, are things. But I also think that Donald Trump would probably win anyway. Because white people want their country back. They want their dominance back. White people share in those ambitions. White men feel a certain way. So do, Latino men, apparently. There's this masculine culture. There's this whiteness. There's this American dream. And so I wish she had run a better campaign. I wish she had evoked more of what Sister Girl does. But even if she had, I think Donald Trump would have won anyway. And that's the sad conclusion I had to come to, was that everything this man has done is not disqualifying. Because I would have voted for my pet rock before I voted for him.
Right. Right. And I think because of because of his record and his reputation and, the person that he is, there was still this thought that maybe she could win. Like, I understood everything that you said. I watched some of her responses to questions where she just avoided answering the question directly. But my hope was, okay, but she's a Black woman and I'm not voting for Trump. So it was,
even if she's not a Black woman, she's not Trump.
She's
a Black woman.
So I think, getting caught up in that cycle, we just thought, oh, wow. But then when you have a moment of silence with yourself and looking at the country and the history in the world, then it's like, okay, no, she wasn't going to win that. you know. And but the hope and the anticipation and the excitement I saw of women coming together, which is something we should do anyway. You know, people building forums and, you know, new organizations and the ministry, the women leading ministries coming together and praying and, you know, all of the things that we do. And so the thought was that maybe if we do all of this, this would help her and help other people see it the way that we do. So in the event that anyone, I mean, I had to check myself at work, a young lady, I love the young ladies I work with. And she was like, well, they both evil. And I said, I don't care. You know, I totally was no longer her boss in that moment. And I was like, I do not care what, but you need to go and vote for him, period. I don't care what you think. And so it wasn't until after I realized I kind of violated her rights of thought and everything. And I apologized, but I was just caught up in he cannot win. I don't care what the other side looks like. It can't be him.
Yeah.
And so I think so many kind of jumped on that bandwagon.
So I want to respond to Donna's comments that Latino men did not vote for him because they believed that women should be in the home. And I think that that's, you know, a thing. And I was really leaning into that. And so then I did a little Google research to see whether or not there have been women presidents in Latin America. And yes, there have been. We're behind Latin America in that. So I think that white men and Latino men, I think that's like part of that American dream, right? That you come here and you want to fit into this American dream of whiteness. Everybody wants to be white in America. Indians come here, they want to be white. Mexicans come here, they want to be white. They're not trying to be other. They're not trying to be BIPOC. They want to be with us. They're trying to assimilate into American society and assimilate into the American dream. And in the American dream, we have the most masculinist culture, even though we pretend not to.
Yes, we do.
How many places in the world have never had a female leader? But we believe that we're enlightened and we're not. So I think that that is probably an explanation, but I think it's only partial explanation. I think anti-Blackness has to show up somewhere. They said she wasn't Black. I think that colorism and, you know, this whole idea of, you know, she's not really Black because A, B, C, D, and E is a problem. So I have lots and lots and lots of feelings about why she didn't win. But it was a possibility of history being made, of that history not being made. It was disappointment that was hurtful. It was absolutely disappointment. Let me say this. I said I felt like Charlie Brown. When Lucy dangled that damn ball, and he fell flat on his face and woke up with a concussion, okay? Like, what in the world? Why did I even believe that this nation would vote for a Black woman?
Exactly.
When I was young, I never would have been that stupid. I feel like, you know, anybody been with a man and then take a man back and you knew how bad he was, you took him back anyway.
Anyway.
That thing worse. And it's like, oh, why was I so stupid? I felt like that. I felt like we had been mesmerized by a false possibility and by lies from people in polls and other things. And then you look at it, and it's like, girl, you know what? This is the same old stuff. And even more than that, I feel like I'm like reading these things, and these Latino men are saying, this man, he was a Guatemalan immigrant. And he said, he's not legally in this country. He said, well, I think Donald Trump is good for the economy and he'll bring the economy back. And he's not going to deport people like me because he's only going after people who did bad things and I don't do anything bad. And I'm like, you are so fucking stupid. Excuse me, because I'm free. You are so stupid. Like, what in the world? Help me understand what made you think he is going to look up your criminal record. They're going to drive down, see you, arrest you just in case if you don't have papers you can produce. And you, what, are they going to run a background check on you? Like when you're driving to the street and they run a background check on your license, see if they're going to. This is not how it works. And the reason they should know it doesn't work that way is because in 2016, when he was elected, he was doing the same thing. And I heard from some of my Hispanic Latino neighbors that he was raiding people's homes. I mean, the ICE was raiding people's homes with no warrants. They don't even need like an arrest warrant. They can't really go into your home, but they were doing it anyway. They're picking kids up in schools, picking parents up at the workplace. As you were walking down the street, they were getting you. And you think that they are not going to do worse after this time he's promised mass deportation? And there's no rules or laws that are going to stop him. So I feel like people got caught up in things, believing, he told women, "Hey, I'm not going to, I'm against the national abortion ban," and and people chose to believe him because they wanted to believe him, not because anything he said was rooted in his record or his rhetoric. And that's what scares me about him in this moment in time we're in right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a scary time for us all. So I was watching or listening to your some of your comments, just the healing part. And so I thought of the aftermath. What is the aftermath of this? And I mean, it was so many people in tears and sadness and hopelessness, now, and um the healing that's needed from what we've just experienced. And I think personally, for a lot of women, it probably triggered some deeper wounds, some deeper wounds of rejection, deeper wounds of, sexism and abandonment. It just triggered
Racism.
racism, all of the things that, not that other people, but Black women have endured, the abuse and the victimization, and carrying the weight of generations of toxicity and rape and sexual abuse. And I think it was this moment of hope, like, hey, if this happens, we win, in spite of, not just for presidency, but an opportunity to become more than we've ever been.
And I want to caution us with that, because we thought we won with Obama.
Right.
And I'm not trying to be mean, because we all love our Obamas, go Barack. But the reality is, a president of the United States empire is not going to fix the kind of injustice that the empire produces. I don't care what that person looks like. They will assimilate into the empire before they actually bring the hood with them, right? The reality is that there's a limited, it's symbolic, and there's some other things that could happen. People could get appointments, people could be more seen and more heard, but the empire rules are going to be the empire rules. And the empire rules tolerate mass incarceration, tolerate homelessness. Black people are the most homeless people in the United States, tolerate concentrated poverty and hypersegregation of Black Americans. Our society tolerates that, police abuse and all of that. And you don't see any president really running to end that. So I think that sometimes our optimism that there are political solutions to what's broken in our world are fantastical as well. It's not real. But here's the thing. You said something earlier. You said all these Black women came together. We came together like never before, like, never in our lifetimes. We came together to uphold this, candidacy. We need to come together to rebuild our people.
Absolutely.
Imagine if we took that same energy and that same power and we said, you know what? I'm going to change the things I can. I cannot make white people not be racist, but what I can do is use my resources and my voice and my power and my money to make sure that we're taking care of our own. Eugene Robinson wrote a book probably about 10 years ago called Disintegrated. Mm-hmm. And he talked about the fact that Black people no longer function as a whole. They were broken into different factions. You have your transcendent Black people who don't really consider themselves Black unless something happens, like maybe last Tuesday they're Black. Or you have your emerging groups of Black people. And those are people who are either immigrants, recent immigrants to this nation, or biracial people who don't really have a full sense of Black identity. Then you have your middle class Black people, and that's the largest group of Black people, right? And then you have everybody we left behind. And everybody we left behind, we're comfortable leaving them there. We blame them for everything that's going wrong. Chris Rock, what he said, I love Black people, but I hate, that's um, is that what am I saying? Sorry, I got distracted reading.
I know.
That 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 we have to come together and we have to take care of our own. We have to take care of the least of us. If we don't care about them and we just leave them off to their own on election day, we're demanding they vote for our way. What? We don't listen to them. We're ashamed of them. We treat them as though we don't understand that intergenerational mass incarceration, intergenerational being in foster care, intergenerational child rape, intergenerational, all this shit is not going to produce some brokenness. We have so much more compassion for Ethan Crumbly because his mother and father are cheating on each other than we do for kids in our community who had nothing going for them at all. From the time they were born into oppressive situations. We've got to put some healing in our community, not just for ourselves, but we need healing as a people. And certainly it starts with self. But we need
It does.
healing as a people. We need to heal. People say these people don't care about life. That's what we always do. We always say things like poor people don't care about life. Poor Black kids don't care about life. We don't care about their lives. Let's start there. Because if we cared about their lives, we would not be able to tolerate knowing how some of these young people are living.
That's
And you
true.
know, because you've been there, Crystal, you've worked with me.
Yes.
And you're still working in that space. You know the circumstances a lot of kids are born into and raised into and thrown away into. And all of it has to do with intergenerational racism that has never been, cured. But it's now our responsibility. Kamala Harris won't fix that. Even if she's president, we've got to have a local solution. And then we've got to give voice to their needs and their concerns so that we can act on their behalf and make demands on politicians. We keep on asking politicians, what are you going to do for my community? And I think it's the wrong thing to do. We need to tell them, if you want my vote, you're going to do this for my community. That's what white people do. That's
Oh,
what
I know.
businesses do. They
Yeah.
don't ask, Dan Gilbert does not go to the mayoral candidate saying, what are you going to do for me? He has a list of expectations. Where's ours? And so that new thing I'm working on in Detroit is the Black Detroit Democracy Project. This idea that if we can come together and really listen and build and heal and just focus on ourselves and our own healing and our own pathways, we can work together to leverage more political power. We can have a 21st century Black slate in Detroit that actually influences votes as opposed to something that doesn't really have as much impact as it did in the past. That's the newest thing. And because I absolutely believe that's the thing we can change. That's the thing we should change.
I agree. It was my thought. Look, Regina said, appreciate your perspective. That man was not an option. I wanted to see her. It all boils down to white power. Pray for light, not darkness. More people will need counseling. Well, I've always thought people needed counseling, and not just through this endeavor. But my thought was, when I thought about the heaviness, and how do we turn this heaviness into something powerful for our community? Because she did not win, it doesn't mean the work ends. And the collaborations and the conversations, but it's so much self-hate in people that those connections never last, or the resources does not manifest, because when you say healing, people think that's everybody else but them. Mm-hmm. It's something about the word healing that turns people off. And so when I was looking at how do we move from this burden, this heaviness, I know for myself, I'll ask myself, what can I do differently now? Or what can I continue to do or evolve from where I'm at to make a difference in the community? Because that's our responsibility. I agree with you. But when the healing part, you can't get to that without healing.
No, you can't. You can't. And then there's therapy. It's never been more available. You can call BetterHelp. You can
BetterHelp,
online therapy.
It is so many resources for that. But it's this thought process that if I'm accomplished, if I'm making a good living, if I'm making money, if I'm driving good, then what does healing have to do with me? And what I've discovered, those are some of the most sickest people most of the time, because their accomplishments, they believe, supersedes inner healing.
I was born into a family that thought you could achieve our way out of trauma. There's no question in my mind. That was all of Black achievement,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, I was
I
the
wrote a poem
hero
about it. I
child.
called it Alcoholism and Achievement, right? We was
Yeah.
hand in hand, right? But it was this mindset that I'm going to achieve my way. You know, people look at little kids. Oh, this little kid is so smart. They're so smart. They're so smart. They're so smart. My son's best friend in college was so smart, so smart, so smart. And he came from so many broken situations. He graduated from U of M in 4 years and then 2 years later shot himself in the head. He was so smart, but he needed healing. And we don't look at the balanced emotional health of people, including ourselves. I think nobody can get better unless they acknowledge they have a problem. Now, a lot of us know we have a problem right now because we're feeling it. We're angry, we're hurt, we're depressed, we're hopeless, we're all of these things. And now is the time to bring it about. I had a community member reach out to me because we had um, Dr. Rose Moulton come into ECN to do some healing after we had a terrorist attack on our building.
Right.
And she was on television the day after the election, I think. And
Right.
so one of my, actually one of the awardees watched television and saw her and sent me a message saying, you know, can we have her come back? My 22-year-old daughter is, I don't know how to stop her. I can't stop her from crying. So she's going to be back at ECN on the 15th.
Okay.
And she's going to be, but I think it's got to be a series of healing. It's not one day thing.
Of
And so we
course.
definitely need you to come in, Crystal, and others to come in and just get to some conversations about healing. And sometimes I think it's easier to do it in a group than individually.
It is.
I say, you had me coming to something and I didn't even know what it was. And then everybody was like healed. You know what I mean?
I know,
Like, I
right?
think you can approach healing without calling it healing. I think you can approach trauma interventions without calling them that.
Well, you know, I agree. And it's from that experience we had, Donna, there that I am rebirthing my ministry from the conference thing to the healing circles. Of course, it won't be called that, but the I Choose Me circles is for that purpose. And I think a lot of times when we just having conversation, things come up and come out. And I think that is a great approach for the healing, because if we call it what it is, then I'm not coming.
Yeah.
And so we have to create some type of excitement around it in order for it to occur. And so I think in this aftermath, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. I think conversation should continue. I think when I saw Kamala and I would listen to her responses, and first I would blame it on the fact that I wasn't necessarily well versed politically, but I know when someone is not answering a question directly. But then I said, okay, well, so what? So I think the burden, I can even admit for myself, when I thought about all of my own struggles as a Black woman, you know, society deemed women to be a certain thing. And I just was never that thing. You know, I'm 5'9", 10, you know, wear size 10 shoe, you know, so I'm a large woman, boisterous. You know, I didn't fit into the cup that men or society say is considered a woman or feminine. So I would, when she did not win and that heaviness, it just took me back, which says, wow, we really still got a lot of healing to do interpersonally in order that we come together authentically so that we can heal from layers
You
of
know,
trauma.
I think we do need to heal from layers of trauma. I think the first thing we have to do is name it, right? And
Yeah.
acknowledge it. And really look at the source of it. You know, I'm not a therapist.
Yes, you are.
By any means, but I think that, you know, part of it is sometimes by helping other people, that's a healing process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you are helping take care of other people, it helps you. It's mutual. You benefit and they benefit, especially if you do it properly. And I
And it
think
holds you accountable.
and hold you accountable. And that's the reason why I think it's so important for us to say, if we don't have a president who can do that, what can we as powerful, strong, influential Black women do to help heal our community? Because it needed healing before November 5th, and it really needs healing now as well. And, you know, I mean, first we have to, you know, heal ourselves. First we have to get ourselves together and deal with that heaviness and all of that, because there is a lot of anxiety. And I think for me, as much as I had anxiety about Black women losing, and it was a crazy thing, okay? The day before Kamala won, I thought, wow, lost. I thought she's going to win this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to win this thing. And she must be a really good politician for a Black woman to be able to win this thing. She stays on message and she's got that kind of discipline and so on and so forth. And so I actually had deluded myself into believing that her staying on message was a strength. Like you could not have convinced me that the results were not going to be the opposite.
Right.
That's how deluded I was, right? I thought she has really captured the imagination and she's done that. And in order to be president of the United States, you have to do that. And I started thinking things I don't even believe, right? That you have to sacrifice your true self to lead. So I'm mad at myself on so many levels. First of all, for believing stuff and for not acknowledging things as they were, and getting caught up.
As we do. You have a couple of questions here, one from Trailblazers. But what happens when Black men get blasted for not voting for Kamala? How does that get addressed?
80% of more Black men voted for Kamala than any other group of men. And the men I know who are closest to me were fiercely supportive of her election. I think we have to stop turning on each other, and the war between the sexes has to end.
Yes.
We have to love on each other. Our community cannot survive. Who's going to win? If I win, oh, look, I won against Black men. What's the prize?
Right.
They win against Black
women. A deeper issue. I mean, we have to stop. We have to stop fighting against each other and learn to fight the world together.
Exactly. Coming together in love for each other. And it's hard because we have a 16-year-old who came into our center the other day, the day after the election. He was celebrating. He was like, yay, Trump won. And so, now mind you, I was out that day, right? He was like, he said, what do you like about it? He said, I love states' rights. And it's like, oh my God, you are so ignorant. Right. I was like, I'm so glad it wasn't me, because I would have probably just cussed him out that day. I'm better than I was on Wednesday. And then it's like, police have to have the right. And it's like, I don't know. I think that we have to have patience, and we have to show love, and we have to show willingness and humility to say, maybe we can't understand how they feel. Maybe it's not just, sexism. And a lot of times it is. I think, Barack Obama coming to the hood, giving people lessons on, I think that was a bad move. But I think even if it is, there's a lot of Black men who have a lot of trauma related to their mothers, related to their grandmothers. They have, we have daddy issues. A lot of them have mama issues. And we have to be willing to acknowledge that. And that's so I refuse to turn on Black men. I love Black men, always have. And I'm going to love Black men, even though 20% of them thought Trump was a better option.
Yeah. So we have another question. How do we move from the heaviness? I've talked to many that have anxiety, sadness, feelings of hopelessness, and even some elders. I think, like you mentioned already, counseling is available. The question is, what is my purpose? What has God created me for? What has he created me to do? And I think a lot of times people are unsure because of the pain that already existed. The struggle. You don't know what it is that you should be doing for the community or for people. And so I think examining that heaviness and getting to the root of the heaviness, because the heaviness didn't just come from this election. It may have triggered some things that was already there, is my belief.
I think it's also grief.
Grief.
I think it is absolutely grief. I figured I was in grief because the presidency of Kamala Harris presidency died. I don't watch the television, and there's grief. My hopes and dreams and excitement, I've lost that. And so the stages of grief, what do you go through? You go through anger, denial, bargaining, acceptance, all of these things over and over and over again, sadness. And I don't know that you should try to rush through grief. I
You
think
can't. You
you
shouldn't.
should
And that's
allow
what we do.
yourself to hurt. It
Yeah.
hurts. Today, listening to me, I'm in my acceptance day. It's Sunday, but tomorrow I might wake up and I might be mad at the world again. You know what I mean? I've been through every side. Sometimes in 20 minutes, I can go through everything. So I get it. We're all in that space of grief. It's some level of it, because even though I can rationalize it and understand it, I still know I live in America, but that I believe we have moved away from somewhat, and it hurts. It really does hurt to know that 65 million people looked at this man and thought he should be leader. And I also think there's fear.
There you go.
There is absolute fear. What will he do? What can he do? If 65 million people thought this was okay, who will stop him? And I don't have answers for that, other than if we come together and work together as a people, we're more likely to survive whatever he plans on doing than if we allow ourselves to be separated. And the other thing is this, and I think this is important to me. 60% or 61% of, according to some data, Latinx women, Hispanic women voted for Kamala Harris. Almost 50% of white women vote for Kamala Harris. They're hurting too. Am I really going to be mad at the white women who voted for her because their sisters did not, as if they controlled that? There's a whole lot of people who are grieving. And I think when we get through our initial grief, we have to understand that we're stronger together, and that we can't be mad at all Latino people because of the fact that some of them voted for Trump. And by the way, those people who are most at risk right now didn't have the vote. They're not citizens. And we're saying we hope they get deported because some other we really have to also examine our conscience and ask ourselves whether we really want bad things to happen to other people because we are hurting.
And that is not a representation of love as we started. And before we close out, Trailblazer Radio is saying politics divide houses, destroy relationships, and causes rifts that may never heal. And I think healing is a choice, regardless to what causes the divide. And oftentimes it just leads me to believe that the divide was already there. In my 33 years of practice, I don't study politics, but I study people. I study pain. And a lot of times things that happen just demonstrates the real truth of the connection in the first place. And so healing is always a choice. It's just, do people feel like it's worth it? Do people want to put in the work? Do people want to put in the pain, because it hurts to heal? And so that's why so often people suppress their emotions and feelings about whatever that happens in the family and never get to that place. But healing is a choice.
Yeah. And I also want to say one last thing. Donald Trump is an expert at dividing people. He's gifted at knowing exactly what people's weaknesses are and honing in on those weaknesses. We have to understand, just like you are in any type of narcissistic relationship that you are with somebody, that you've been played. Okay. When he says that these immigrant illegal people are taking Black jobs and Black people are offended. What's a Black job? But you know who else is offended? Latino people are offended. Wait a minute, this is my job. What makes you think you have the right to my job? And it becomes, now we're clashing with each other. Who has the right to these jobs? As opposed to us saying, wait a minute. You know what I'm saying? We have to, he does that on purpose. He separates people on purpose. And so togetherness is a choice, not just healing, but moving away from what he has decided he wants America to be, and that is divided into factions, fighting each other while he and his friends take all the power. That's a choice. And so I choose me, but I also choose we. And it's a choice, and it's a hard one, because I wanted everybody to pay on Wednesday. Right. I had to work my way out of those feelings. I think it's normal. I don't think we should feel guilty about it, because that's part of the pain, right? I just think that we can't stay there, because I don't want to shame anybody for any feelings. Because, you know, when stuff happens, your feelings are your feelings. And I think sometimes we tend to judge people for how they feel. And I think that's not fair either.
That's true. Well, to wrap up, Donna, I have enjoyed this conversation, your passion, just everything that you bring to the table in many areas, especially the love you have for community. But I just want to end by saying, and when we started, we talked about God being love, and without love, we cannot heal anything or do anything. So I think if we just remember and be intentional about love, I think that is the healing agent for what we are experiencing and what we experience, period. So, Donna, is there anything you want to leave us with before we close out?
No, I just thank you for having me on here. It really forced me to think through and maybe even get through some healing today because I had to think all day. What am I going to say? What am I going to say? So thank you for this opportunity to share. And I hope that we can all come together and keep the energy of sisterhood where it
Exactly.
needs to be because we are each other's sisters, and I love the sisterhood. So I hope we stay in that moment.
Thank you, and enjoy the Lions game tonight. And Donna, we will talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.